Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I am Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst of Friends of FantasyBenefits.com. Joining me on this episode is Dave McDonald. How you doing, Dave?
Good. I think we're just we've been talking for a while, so the tongue is getting twisted a little bit now. But
Yeah.
we're getting to I think at this point both of our favorite segments of the pod, the strategy section.
Yeah. The strategy section for me is my favorite, and I think also the most important because
I
I
agree.
don't think enough podcasts out there focus on just strictly strategy, and so this will be less about. I mean, we'll definitely talk about
Cough,
players.
cough, Jake.
Yeah. We'll definitely talk about players, individual players and stuff, and we do have some because we're talking about closers tonight and closing strategy. We'll definitely have some thoughts on some of the kind of muddled closing situations moving forward, but it's mostly about trying to figure out how to play the game, which I think is the most important part of it. And I think that one of the things you see from some of the really, really good players in NFBC specifically, but even in the fantasy industry generally, is I think the people who end up winning leagues are often just really, really good players. They may not be the best at analysis or the best at scouting, but they're just damn good game players. And I like to think of myself as a pretty good game player. I know you like to think of yourself as a pretty damn good game player. So let's talk about how we're approaching the closer chaos. And there is always chaos in closing situations. Let's start with kind of an easy kind of setup because I'm sure there are people who are struggling with saves at this point in the season. Maybe they didn't pay for saves. Maybe they did pay for saves and they just paid for bad saves. But how are you approaching saves the rest of the way if you're behind right now?
Yeah. So that question is basically what I'm doing. Is I'm doing deep dives on every single team, at least the ones that are not obvious, because like you said, there's a lot of muddled situations, but there's a bunch of situations where we know what's up, right? We know Kenley Jansen's closing in Boston. We know Felix Bautista's closing in Baltimore. But what's happening on other teams? If you don't know for sure, do a deep dive and look at the usage patterns. So you're not just looking to see who got the saves, because sometimes there's random saves that come about because the game goes to 10 or 11 innings where the closer was used in the 9th or maybe even the 10th or whatever. But so you're not just looking at who gets saves. You're looking at who's pitching in the save innings, in the situations where they're saving for their closers and stuff. So you need to look. And then you also have to keep in mind, is the guy that I'm looking into, was he available that game? Because you might see sometimes where, Minter closed a couple of games earlier this week because Raisel Iglesias had pitched 3 out of 4 games or pitched 2 in a row, and they didn't want him to go 3 in a row. So you need to look at every situation individually and break it down and look at who are the possibilities here, who has previous closing experience, how are they doing, like what's their Sierra, are they pitching well, are they getting strikeouts, are they not walking guys? Everything that you're looking for in a closer, you're looking for the best candidates of, okay, is the guy who's currently closing here, is he definitely like cemented into his role, or is there an opportunity for someone to come along? And if so, is there a prime candidate who I can stash for $1 or $2 this week, who maybe in a couple of weeks becomes that guy? Because the worst thing you can do when you need saves is wait for there to be an obvious guy that everybody's going to go for, and then they're going to go for like, $250, $300 or something like that, and you can't afford them.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, monitoring usage, monitoring who's struggling, who's not struggling, is really, really important. And if you aren't willing to put the legwork in, highly, highly, highly recommend Reliever Recon as a resource. It's one of the subscriptions I make sure I pay for every month. Greg Jewett and company over there do a lot of great work, and literally they write it all up for you. So that way, instead of you having to check every box score, you can just read what they wrote from the night before and be like, okay, this is this is what's going on, and this is maybe who I should be investing in.
Now, let me ask you something, Justin, because
Mhm.
as I am a first-time subscriber to Reliever
Mhm.
Recon, so I do get it. What I don't know, and what other people might not know, is let's say you don't want to listen to an hour podcast or whatever, 45-minute podcast or whatever. How do you find out like who they think are good people to target for saves coming up? Like, let's say you're just like, okay, who are some of the guys that might be available who I can target? Where would you go to find that information?
I mean, I pretty much exclusively just use their closer charts. I
Okay.
mean, for me, between that and then, I can kind of look and see, okay, what situations are risky, which situations, might there be a change, and then that gives me the jumping off point to do my own research. So
Okay.
I'm not necessarily, I don't listen to the pod very often, unless I have, someone says, hey, you should go listen to this pod, or, I really want someone's thoughts on it. But for me, it's that closer chart is worth its weight in gold, and it's $5 a month. And you get the daily updates and stuff. I read those as well. But for me, it's really about that closer chart because it gives me an idea of like, okay, who should I be investing in, or who should I be investing my time in to
Now,
kind of go and do the research.
You said the daily updates. Do you mean like the notes underneath the chart, or do you mean something else?
You get daily email updates from Reliever Recon when you're subscribed.
Oh, do I? Okay. All right.
Do.
Fair enough.
Check your email. Yeah.
Okay.
So, highly recommend. Like I said, $5 a month. It's worth its weight in gold. I mean, just like I said, the spreadsheet alone that they do, the Google Doc alone, or Google Sheet alone, is worth what they put into it for sure. But I can't say enough. It's it's my number one. Yeah, it's my number one resource for closing stuff. So, if you're not behind, are you still specking on saves? I bring this up because Adbert Alzolay was a big target for a lot of people in Fab this week. I dropped him 2 weeks ago in my main event because I already had 2 established closers and AJ Pot coming up off the IL soon. And I didn't feel like I could hold on to a fourth reliever. I stand by that decision, but let's say you're like me. You like to pay for saves. You're doing well in saves in most of your leagues. Are you still spec adding other closing potential guys?
Yeah, that's a complicated answer, unfortunately, because it's totally circumstantial. It depends, like, how good am I doing? If I'm blowing everybody out of the water in saves, I'm starting 3 closers a week. And by the way, I 100% think you guys should be banking as many saves as you can until the trade deadline, because you never know. At any point along the way, you can lose multiple closers. I had 3 closers that I drafted last year. And after the trade deadline, I had 0. So the trade deadline's a thing. Injuries happen. I mean, we just saw Helsley go down. We just saw Hendricks go down. So you want to bank as many saves as you can early on, because I feel better about like trying to, I mean, hopefully you don't need to stream bad starters, but like, you're definitely starting your good starting pitchers and your guys who have 2 starts that are solid. But other than that, I think you should be, taking advantage of bank those saves now, because later you might not have them. Because you can always drop closers later and whatever when you don't need them, but you don't want to hamstring yourself. So you don't want to have so many spec closers, that you can't, that you're having problems. You don't want to take zeros on offense, stuff like that. You don't want to get too far behind in wins and Ks by not having enough starters. But I am still adding spec guys, even if I don't quote need saves, because there's a finite number of closers. There's 30 teams that are getting saves, and there's 1 to 2 guys on each team who are going to get you saves on each team in general. So anytime I can take that resource, not only is it helping me, but it's hurting my competition too. So it works twofold. So yes, I am adding, but it depends on the situation. If you dropped Alzolay because you needed a hitter or you needed a starter instead, that's okay. I don't know if the Cubs situation is ever going to be anything other than fluid for the rest of the year. I did add Alzolay in the league where I do need saves, so For me, he was an add, but for you, he was a drop. And sometimes that's how the speculative saves go. And that's okay. It's totally dependent on your team. You have to know where you stand, what you need. There's so many factors that go into it. I don't think you ever really need more than like 4 closers / specs, though. Anything more than that, you probably just don't need to be going after that.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. And I brought up this, this issue because it's something that I obviously went through. But again, like I said, I stand by the decision because what you referenced was my issue. Like, I all of a sudden had a bunch of hurt hitters, and I couldn't afford to fall behind in hitting in order to keep Owsley along. And even though I liked him and I spent, $50 on him earlier on in the season, I had to make the best right decision in that moment. And that for me was dropping him to make sure I had a little bit more roster flexibility with my hitting. And that's kind of the situation that you get put in, especially if you play in an FPC. Obviously, if you're playing in Yahoo or ESPN, you'll have IL spots to kind of stash guys, and then that opens up roster spots on your team that you can use. But even in those leagues, you may be running in situations where you've got full offenses and you might need to make a cut. I try my best to hold on to those type of specs, though, or those type of lower tier closers, because like you said, you just never know what's going to happen at the trade deadline. Last year, I thought Iglesias was a clear top 5 closer rest of the way, and all of a sudden he is moved off of my team because he gets traded and he's a setup guy. So speaking of the trade deadline, or actually, we'll get to the trade deadline here. It's like, how long do you hold on to a spec? So let's say, there's a guy you think, hey, he's been pitching in high leverage. I think he's got, the guy ahead of him is struggling right now, or, I think there's a chance he moves up into the role. I'm going to spec on him for a few dollars. And then it's a week or two later and nothing's changed. How long do you hold on to a spec?
Yeah, again, it just depends on the situation. It depends. Is the closer ahead of him, cemented in that role, or are they shaky? Is it the same as it was a couple of weeks ago? If so, I mean, then you have the right spec. If you're in a situation where things are still muddy or unclear, and like the guy ahead of him doesn't clearly have the role, then that's a good spec to own. I mean, assuming you want to own a spec. So, if you're talking about, I'm not interested in holding a guy behind a guy just because he's next in line. If I need the main closer who's cemented in the role to get hurt for my guy to get the job, I'm not really super interested in that. I'm interested in those jobs like the Cubs, where we don't really know who's like, nobody's cemented in that role. We don't know, like anybody could bust out of it. Alzolay feels like the best bet to me, but Leiter's there. They've got some other guys who I'm not super concerned with right now, but they could bring someone up or whatever. But yeah, if that's your spec that you believed in before and nothing's changed, like in terms of he hasn't become closer there, but it's still a sketchy situation, then you still hold him. I mean, it's not like I pick him up for a week or two and then I drop him. If they're still good spec, I'm still holding him. I picked up Hunter Harvey like 3 weeks ago, and he's kind of been trading on and off with Kyle Finnegan for saves. And I mean, I can't imagine a better spec than him out there right now. So I'm still holding him.
Yeah, I think you're right on. It's really situation dependent. But this is also why roster resource and reliever recon can be really your best friends in terms of looking at the usage, what's changed. I think a lot of people spec'd on Nick Anderson thinking Raciel Iglesias was going to lose that role, because he was struggling coming off the IL. At this point, it doesn't look like it. You should have dropped Nick Anderson back in the pool and spec'd on someone else if you're still.
Although Raisel did get blown up today, but
did he? Of course he did.
He did, but he's still not in any danger of losing his role.
Yeah. At what point do you start stashing targets that might get saves after the trade deadline? So if you're, one of the things I like to do, usually at the beginning of July, I start really looking at who do I think could get traded off a team that's not contending. So,
Yeah.
And especially guys who might be in the last year of their contract or just would have more value to a team being traded than kept on their roster. And I start making out a plan of, hey, I need to start attacking these guys. What point do you start actually stashing those players?
Yeah, so what you said is exactly the same thing that I do. Generally, once we get into July, I'm looking at options. And when a clear option becomes clear to me, then I might pick them up at the beginning of July. It depends on how clear they are. Like if it's like, okay, obviously this guy's a trade candidate and this guy is obviously next in line. In those situations, I want to get that guy on my roster as soon as possible because someone else is probably going to start looking around that same time too. If you wait until mid-July, definitely if you wait till late July, it might be too late to get those guys. Now, there will be some guys where, okay, I need multiple guys to get traded, or I need, or this guy, is might be the next in line, but it's not sure. I'm not sure about it. It could be this guy too. Those situations, I'm not in a hurry to add them until mid to later July. But if there is a guy who clearly is the guy behind a guy who clearly could be traded, those are the targets that you want to add pretty much right when the calendar turns to July, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like one of the guys that I'm kind of looking at is Josh Hader. He's in the last year of his deal. The Padres have struggled. Now, the Padres are good enough to easily get back into a playoff race and really may just decide to hold on to everything to see if they can squeak their way into the playoffs like they did last year. But, a guy who's in the last year of Kyle Finnegan, like you mentioned with Hunter Harvey, we're kind of waiting for Hunter Harvey to just take over because he's got the better skills anyways. But Kyle Finnegan could easily be on the move. Guys.
But Kyle Finnegan is under team control until like 2025. So I don't know.
But that makes him more valuable to a team like the Nationals to move him because they'll get more back because he's under, pretty affordable.
But I think Harvey could be moved too. So you don't really know which. Yeah, it could go either way.
Guys like, Scott Barlow and Aroldis Chapman are interesting, but both could get traded or neither could get traded. It's just it's a hard, so we'll start figuring that out, and we'll definitely have a strategy section when we get to the beginning of July, who the guys that we're starting to kind of stash in leagues. So before the trade deadline.
By the way, is it Nick Martinez in San Diego? Looks like would be next in line.
Right now he is, I think. Robert Suarez was the guy they gave all that money to. But he's on the IL with, I think, elbow inflammation, I want to say. So
it's not good.
So I think Nick Martinez would be the guy to pick up. Which would be really, really interesting in San Diego because while they've struggled, I still think it's a good team.
Yeah.
So I don't think they could get easily back into this. So let's talk about some of these situations that are in flux. And we'll start with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Scott McGough was a guy who was picked up in a number of leagues this last weekend because he got a late save in the week. Are you buying on Scott McGough? Do you think that Miguel Castro is still the main guy? Do you think there is a main guy?
Yeah, this has been a real fun team to spec on, and by that I mean not fun at all. So I think coming into the season, I think they wanted McGough to be the closer. I think they gave him early opportunities and he blew them. And after blowing several, I think they ended up on Chafin for a while, or Chafin, sorry. And then I think eventually Miguel Castro kind of entered the picture. And I think they'd rather have Chafin be like a fireman / face lefties kind of guy. Now, I do think he's going to get the odd op here and there, but to me, it still looks like Castro's probably more or less the guy. Now, tonight, he did get the save tonight. Castro did. He did give up a run on 2 hits, but, nothing too bad. He did, like I said, he still got the save. I don't know. I don't feel like McGough is – I don't know. Castro, after he gave up that grand slam to Rosario, they kind of gave him a big break. And I don't know, maybe it was just like a mental break or something, but – He didn't pitch for a while in the last week. I think he only pitched like one time. So I feel like they wanted to give him a mental break, and maybe they went back to him today. I would still put him over McGough personally.
I think this is just going to switch hands over and over again until they make a move at the deadline. I think the Diamondbacks are a team that may look to add an established closer. They also need to add starting pitching, and they probably can't add everything. But they do have a very rich farm system to trade from if they do decide that this is part of their window. So
it's weird to think of the Diamondbacks as a contender, but they are.
They've done a fantastic job in rebuilding that team.
Yeah.
I know they got a lot of heat for some of their trades from their, former stars like Goldschmidt, like they, traded away Dansby Swanson for just about nothing. But at the end of the day, this rebuild has come together really well, and they're leading the division, and
they're 4 games ahead of the Dodgers. Like, think about that. That's crazy.
I don't know if I told you this, but I made a bet on the Diamondbacks to win the division prior to the start of the season. So.
I think you actually did tell me that. That's a hell of a call, man.
It's still a lot of baseball to go, but
right. But their offense has been really exciting. I mean, between Ketel Marte, Corbin Carroll's been the biggest driver, but Lourdes Gurriel has been great. Christian Walker. They brought Jake McCarthy back up. He's running wild. And then behind Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly in the rotation, behind those two, they've got 3 piles of crap. But man, those two have been great, and the offense has been working. And it's crazy, but it's been a fun ride for them.
Yeah, I hope it keeps going for my pocketbook's sake.
There you go.
We've talked about the Chicago Cubs a little bit with Edward Alzolay, who, again, was a popular pickup this last week, but Mark Leiter Jr. I think this is another muddled situation that I think will get figured out at some point, but I just don't know how long it's going to take.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the thing that I'm watching for is when Alzolay stops. So I think part of his appeal was the fact that he could go multiple innings because he used to be a starter. Mm-hmm. So I've been watching, okay, are they going to stop giving him the multi-inning appearances? And they have been cutting down because, he had a ton until mid-May, and then it was 1 inning, 1 inning, 1 inning, a third of an inning, then 2 innings, then 1 inning, 1 inning, 1 inning, 1 inning. So I think once they get him established as a 1-inning guy, I don't know if that's making any sense to you, but for me, I think he is their best candidate to close. I mean, Leiter has had several blow-ups lately. When I was on with Sarah from Bleed Cubby Blues, Sarah Sanchez, she follows the Cubs. I said I thought Leiter was the guy. She disagreed with me. She's like, I don't know if she said Alzolay, but she didn't love Leiter as the guy. So the more I've seen it lately, it looks like Alzolay could take over. And will he? I don't know. It's certainly still muddied, but he did get the last save op. And if they stop giving him those multiple inning outings, if they're just going to make him a one inning guy, he could be a really good closer.
I think he could too. I think he is the lead guy. I really thought Fulmer was going to be the guy. But
they wanted Fulmer to be the guy, yeah.
I wanted him to be the guy too. Apparently didn't work out. So
he was terrible, yeah.
Yeah. What about the Detroit Tigers? Alex Lang, he has been kind of up and down. He got a save tonight, but are you worried that he's going to lose this job?
I don't think so. Is there anybody even in that pen? Really? I don't think so. Foley just got blown up recently. Will Vest. I don't know that there's any question that it's Lang. Is it Lang or Lange?
I think it's Lang.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Lang's gotten pretty much all their saves, right? I don't think there's any confusion there about who it is, unless you're saying, will he be good enough to keep it, as in, he's not pitching well enough to keep it. But, I mean, he walks a lot of guys, but he strikes a lot of guys out. The Sierra is still at 3.32. I think he's fine, and I don't see them making a change there.
Yeah, I think he's probably the guy moving forward, and this is they've got him under control until 2027. So, like, there's no reason, unless they got an absolute haul, there would be no reason for them to do much. He's just struggled in his last few outings prior to tonight. And we are recording this Monday night, so you'll be hearing this on Thursday. And so I do want to, if he gets blown up or saves 2 games between now and then, this is why the analysis is the way it is. We talked about Trevor May in yesterday's episode because he's one of the more picked up guys. I do not care about Oakland closers at all.
Nope.
Like I don't care, right?
They just don't win enough to matter. Yeah. And I don't Trevor May, I expect him to be better than he's been, but he's still bad.
Yeah. I don't think I could say it any better than that. We've also talked a little bit about the Nationals closing situation. You and I are both kind of thinking that Hunter Harvey is the better pitcher, but they keep going back to Finnegan.
Yeah, well, it seemed like they were trading off. Like, it would be one of them gets one save up, the next one you get the save up. Like, it didn't even seem like it was dependent on who was coming up to bat, unless it just happened in that way. But it literally looked like Finnegan, Harvey. So, like, I think that they're both still, in the mix for the saves. Harvey got the last one, but then Finnegan got a win the next day. On Sunday, they had a 4-run win, so it would have been a save situation where Finnegan was set up for Harvey, so Harvey would have been the closer again. It's possible Harvey runs away with this at some point. It will depend on the trade deadline too. Obviously, we've said one or both of them could get moved, or neither of them. So I think that they're both still worth stashing. Harvey has much better skill set of the two, but Finnegan is good enough to get saved still.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Well, the Tampa Bay Rays situation, we know that Pete Fairbanks is on rehab assignment right now. Had a pretty decent outing, I believe, yesterday or on Sunday. I don't trust Pete Fairbanks to stay healthy, and I've said this all along. It's the reason why I didn't draft him anywhere in any leagues this year. I stand by that. So for me, Jason Adams, the guy I would want out of that Tampa Bay pen, but I also could see them adding to it. I mean, they're a team that has flirted with Craig Kimbrell at the trade deadline a couple of years ago. They could definitely bolster that pen with an established closer. But Jason Adams for you, Pete Fairbanks for you, where you got?
No, I think you made a lot of good points there, and I agree completely. They could go back to Fairbanks. They could keep Adam. They could split the role between the two. They could add someone at the deadline. That wouldn't surprise me either. I honestly don't know. The Rays are always a fucking crapshoot, and I don't have a guess. I generally ignore the Rays situations because I don't like to invest in Rays quote unquote closers, but they have been going more with like when they've stuck by Fairbanks, and then now they've kind of looks like they're sticking by Adam too. It seems like right now. So it's not to say that they're not worth owning. It's a muddied situation, and it's just, I don't know. They're all worth owning. I don't know how it's going to shake out.
All right. What about the Miami Marlins? Dylan Floro kind of filled in while AJ Puck was out. Now Puck is back, but it looks like they're going to play it a little bit more conservatively. So this might be a little bit of a shared role. Where are you at on the Marlins situation?
Why don't you tell me more about that? Because I didn't hear that.
I had read something somewhere about him, them not wanting Puck necessarily to do back-to-backs as often as he was doing previously because of injury.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, Puck is another guy who can't stay healthy. Although he did pitch back-to-back on the 10th and the 11th of June. So I don't know. I would say Puck is still the guy there now that he's back. I think the Floro will still get the occasional save here or there, but I don't think it's like a shared job. I think it's Puck's job, and then maybe if they don't want to overwork him, then they go to Floro.
Yeah, I agree. I also think Floro could get traded at the deadline pretty easily. So
that's true.
So that would be a pretty easy way to establish Puck. But as long as Puck's healthy, I think that's his job to lose. The Colorado Rockies job to me is just like the Oakland A's job. I don't care. Like it it just hurts you more than it helps you. They're not a good team. Pitching in Colorado sucks, and there is no really good arms in that bullpen. Where are you at on Rockies?
I'm not where you are. I get what you're saying, but they are not like the A's. Like, they have 10 more wins than the A's, and that's the A's after going on a 6-game win streak. So they did have double the A's win total, but I totally get what you're saying. Like, it's a bad team in a horrific home park where they could easily get blown up. The Bud Black did name Justin Lawrence and Jake Bird as guys who could get saves moving forward. I think it's probably likely to go to Justin Lawrence because they do like to have one set closer. They're not generally a team that does kind of like the muddled shared reliever, shared closer kind of job thing. Lawrence and Bird honestly have very similar skill sets. Like you look at their strikeouts and their walk rates, very similar stats. I do think that Lawrence is the better pitcher. I would probably go with him of the two. But if you're looking to have a cheap spec, you could own Jake Bird for a week or two while you see how this kind of shakes out. It's not the best situation to invest in, but I do think it's worth something.
Yeah, I stand by. I don't care. We discussed the Cardinals and White Sox on the Monday episode. So if you want our thoughts on those, go back and listen to Monday's episode where we talk about Liam Hendricks and Ryan Helsley both going down with forearm elbow issues, which are frightening as all get out. So that is going to wrap us up for this episode. Dave, where can people reach you at? What are you working on?
You can find me on Twitter at RunDMCD. Add that D, and you can find my pitching schedules on rotosource.com for this week and next week, and then hopefully get those hitting schedules up soon as well as some other stuff. So that's pretty much what I'm working on.
You can reach me on Twitter at Mason FWFB. Email me or the show for fantasybenefits@gmail.com. I write daily at Fangraphs and 3 times a week at Fantasy Pros. And I'm on this podcast and the Super and the Bus podcast. For Dave and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball season.